The courthouse doors opened with a dull, practiced groan. Evelyn Cross stepped inside alone. No lawyer walked beside her, no quiet reassurance followed. Just the echo of her shoes against marble floors that had witnessed power long before she ever entered them. She carried a single leather briefcase, scuffed at the corners, held close like something fragile. Across the hall, laughter drifted. Julian Cross stood surrounded by attorneys, voices low and confident, suits immaculate. He was relaxed in the way only a man certain of the ending could be. The divorce had been efficient, brutal, perfectly legal. Julian had seen to that. He had controlled every account, every property title, every corporate structure they had built during their marriage. He had moved assets months before filing, hidden behind clauses Evelyn never knew existed, buried beneath language written for men who assumed no one would ever challenge them. And no one had, especially not her. To Julian, Evelyn was a footnote to his success, useful once, decorative later, disposable in the end. He had spoken about her absence in meetings long before she actually left, rewriting history with a confidence that made people nod along. Inside the courtroom, Julian took his seat at the front, posture open, relaxed. His attorneys arranged documents in precise stacks. Everything was prepared, every weakness accounted for. Evelyn sat behind him, alone. She placed the briefcase at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. Her face revealed nothing, not fear, not anger, just restraint. The judge entered. Formalities followed. Voices rose and fell, controlled and rehearsed. Julian's side spoke first, laying out a narrative of logic and inevitability. The marriage had failed. The assets were clearly documented. The law, they argued, was simple here. Julian didn't look back. He didn't need to. The judge listened, pen moving slowly, eyes calm. When Julian's attorney finished, there was a pause, a glance down the docket. Then the judge looked toward Evelyn. "Mrs. Cross," he said evenly, "you are representing yourself?" "Yes," Evelyn replied. Her voice was steady. Julian allowed himself a small smile. The imbalance was complete. Money, preparation, influence, everything leaned one way. Evelyn had been quiet throughout the process, declining negotiations, ignoring threats disguised as generosity. Julian had mistaken her silence for surrender. The judge nodded. "You may speak when ready." Evelyn did not stand immediately. She looked at Julian's back, at the man who had taught her how power moved through rooms like this, how it hid behind confidence, how it relied on assumptions more than facts. She reached down and lifted the briefcase onto the table. The sound it made was soft, but it cut through the room.
The judge did not look up immediately. The courtroom waited. Marcus shifted in his seat, irritation hardening into something sharper. He had seen hesitation before, judges double-checking figures, clarifying clauses, but this was different. The silence wasn't procedural, it was evaluative. The judge turned a page, then another. Each movement was deliberate, almost careful, as though the paper itself required respect. His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. When he finally looked up, his gaze did not go to Marcus or his attorney. It went to Elena. "Mrs. Hale," the judge said, slowly, "where did you obtain this?" Elena did not sit. She stood straight, hands folded in front of her, voice even. "It has always been mine, Your Honor." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "Your Honor, with respect, this is a divorce proceeding, not a history lesson." The judge raised one finger. Marcus stopped speaking. That alone sent a ripple through the room. Marcus had built his life on momentum, on talking faster, louder, longer than anyone else. Being silenced with a gesture felt unfamiliar, uncomfortable. The judge adjusted his glasses again. "This document predates the marriage by 6 years," he said, "and it names an entity that has not been disclosed in any filing before this court." Marcus's attorney leaned forward, brows knitting. "Your Honor, if there's an undisclosed asset—" "It is not an asset," the judge replied, voice cool. "It is a structure." The word landed heavily. Elena remained still. The judge continued, "Specifically, a private trust, established offshore, yes, but with domestic controlling authority retained by a single beneficiary." Marcus's smile faltered. His attorney turned toward him, whispering urgently. Marcus shook his head once, dismissive. He had trusts. Everyone at his level did. This meant nothing. Until the judge spoke the name. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. The name moved through the room like a pressure change, subtle but absolute. Several attorneys in the gallery stiffened. A clerk looked up, startled. Even the bailiff straightened unconsciously. Marcus didn't recognize the reaction at first. Then he saw his attorney's face drain of color. "That's not possible," Marcus said, standing now, control slipping into his tone. "That name has no standing here." The judge finally looked at him, and there was no warmth in his eyes. "On the contrary," the judge said, "it has standing everywhere." He turned back to the document. "This trust holds controlling interest in 3 of the shell entities listed in Mr. Hale's disclosures, entities that were presented as independently managed." Marcus's breath shortened. "Those companies were acquired after the marriage." "Yes," the judge said, "but the trust acquired them." Silence returned, heavier than before. Elena watched Marcus carefully. This was the moment she had imagined, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. He was recalculating, running numbers, searching for exits that no longer existed. The judge continued, "Furthermore, the trust includes a clause that activates upon marital dissolution under conditions of financial concealment." Marcus's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we object." "Sit down," the judge said. The attorney sat. The judge's voice remained level. "That clause authorizes a full forensic audit and grants immediate cooperation rights to federal financial investigators." Marcus felt the room tilt. "This court," the judge went on, "is obligated to pause proceedings." He closed the folder. The sound was quiet, final. Marcus took a step forward. "This is absurd. She had no involvement in those businesses. She barely—" "She signed," the judge said. Elena spoke for the first time since standing. "Not as a wife," she said, "as the beneficiary." Her words were not loud, but they were precise, each syllable placed carefully, like stones across water. Marcus stared at her, searching her face for deception, for triumph, for anything recognizable. He found none, only calm. The judge rose from his seat. "This court is referring the matter for immediate review. Mr. Hale, you are instructed not to leave the jurisdiction." The gavel did not fall. It wasn't needed. As the courtroom dissolved into hushed confusion, Elena gathered the folder and held it close again. It had done what it was meant to do. It had stopped time. Marcus stood frozen, surrounded by people, suddenly alone, because the story he had written was no longer his.
The judge did not speak right away. He turned a page, then another. The silence lengthened, no longer procedural, no longer neutral. It had weight now, the kind that presses on the chest when something irreversible is being measured. Julian leaned toward his attorney. "What is this?" he whispered. His attorney didn't answer. The judge lifted his eyes, fixing them on Evelyn. "Mrs. Cross," he said carefully, "this document establishes a controlling interest that predates the marriage by nearly a decade." Evelyn nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." Julian straightened in his chair. "That's impossible. Anything of value was built during the marriage." The judge raised a hand. Julian stopped speaking. That single gesture sent a visible ripple through the room. Julian had argued with executives, regulators, even board chairs. He was not used to being cut off without explanation. The judge returned his attention to the folder. "This appears to be a private holding structure," he continued, "with layered subsidiaries and a dormant activation clause." A murmur moved through the gallery. Julian's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we were never notified of—" "You were," the judge replied calmly, "in your client's disclosures." He tapped the page lightly. "Listed here, buried, mischaracterized." Julian's attorney slowly sat back down. Evelyn remained standing, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She did not look at Julian. She watched the judge, attentive, patient, as if this moment had been rehearsed not aloud, but inwardly. The judge leaned back slightly. "Mrs. Cross, this structure grants unilateral authority to the named holder in the event of marital dissolution involving financial concealment." Julian's breath caught. "That authority," the judge went on, "includes immediate reclamation of assets routed through associated entities." Julian shook his head. "This is being taken out of context." The judge looked at him, expression unreadable. "Context is exactly what this document provides." He closed the folder part way, then reopened it, revealing a second section. The paper was newer, the ink darker. "And this," he said, "is a compliance addendum." Julian's attorney's face drained of color. Evelyn spoke softly. "It activates automatically." The judge nodded. "Upon filing." Julian stood. "You're telling me she controls—" "I'm telling you," the judge continued, voice still even, "that the court no longer has jurisdiction over several of the assets you claimed as marital property." The words landed with surgical precision. Julian looked around the room as if expecting someone to correct the mistake. No one did. The confidence that had carried him for years began to fracture, thin cracks spreading beneath the surface. The judge continued, "Furthermore, the activation of this structure requires notification to external auditors." Julian's attorney whispered urgently, "Julian." The judge did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This matter is no longer confined to civil proceedings." The courtroom felt smaller now, closer, as though the walls had shifted inward. Evelyn finally sat down. The judge closed the folder completely. "This court will recess," he said, "and will refer this matter for immediate review." He looked directly at Julian. "You are instructed not to alter or transfer any holdings effective immediately." Julian's mouth opened. No sound came out. As the gavel struck, it wasn't the ending of the hearing that echoed. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Evelyn gathered her briefcase, movements unhurried. She walked past Julian without a glance, without a word. Behind her, the trap finished closing. The collapse did not arrive with noise. It arrived with notifications. Accounts flagged, transfers halted, authorizations revoked. The systems Julian trusted more than people began rejecting him without explanation. By the time his phone stopped vibrating, he already understood what that silence meant. Evelyn had not taken anything. She had reclaimed it. Within 48 hours, auditors requested records Julian could not immediately produce. The structures he had layered for efficiency now demanded transparency. Each shortcut he had taken revealed another thread that led back to him. The investigation widened, not because of Evelyn's actions, but because of Julian's past choices. Deferred filings, aggressive valuations, internal memos written with the confidence that no one would ever read them aloud. Now they were being read carefully. Julian met with lawyers who spoke differently than before. Less assurance, more caution. Words like exposure and escalation replaced certainty. He tried to negotiate time. Time, he learned, was no longer his. When the formal notice arrived, it was brief. Assets frozen pending review. Travel restricted. Cooperation required. Criminal proceedings followed quietly. There were no cameras when Julian was escorted from his office building for the last time, no audience when his board voted unanimously to remove him, no sympathy when partners distanced themselves with statements drafted by people who once praised his leadership. The courtroom returned weeks later for the final ruling. Evelyn entered alone again. This time, the room felt different. The judge's tone was measured, unhurried. The findings were clear. The trust was valid. The concealment was documented. The attempt to erase it through marital dissolution had failed. Full control was restored. Julian did not look at Evelyn. He stared at the table in front of him, hands folded tightly, posture diminished. The man who once filled rooms now occupied as little space as possible. The judge concluded without flourish. "This court recognizes the integrity of preparation," he said, "and the consequences of arrogance." Evelyn stood. She did not smile. She did not speak. She collected her briefcase and turned toward the exit. Julian finally looked up. She met his eyes only briefly, not with triumph, with distance. Outside, the light was clean and ordinary. People moved past the courthouse, unaware that something final had ended inside. Evelyn paused on the steps, breathing evenly, feeling the weight she had carried for years finally lift. She walked away with what she had always owned. The lesson remained behind. Power that depends on silence misunderstands it. Silence is not absence, it is patience, and patience, when prepared, owns everything.